Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning, guys. How you doing today?
Well, happy to see you. And it's so nice.
It is beautiful, although I stepped into the studio just in time to hear you talking about sunburning mothers on Mother's Day, so not quite sure what that was all about,
It'll
but
be 85.
I got it. You're giving the weather forecast.
Yeah.
See, that the context helps.
85.
Yeah, that's hot. Wasn't it like snowing 2 weeks ago? Something like that? 3 weeks ago?
There's a chance.
Maybe 3, yeah.
So we went from winter to summer. That's about right.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll give you this little softball of a question to start with.
I like it. They're warming me up. That's good.
Ball's in your court. What's up with Northern Township and everything
look at that.
around
You're
it?
going to hand me a softball, and then he breaks out the whack-a-mole mallet. Well, I think right now, obviously, people are probably aware that the township filed paperwork to incorporate and asked to become a city. In response, the city filed some paperwork, in essence saying we're going to annex around the lake because we believe we're the best capable of servicing that right now. That's what the current legal state is. I know that Northern Township is having a meeting today with their citizens at the fairgrounds at 6:30 to discuss incorporation. So from a legal standpoint, that's kind of where it currently sits. The city council also put forth a resolution in essence saying, we would ask that you would drop your request to incorporate. We would drop our request to annex, and we all get around a table and have a conversation again. We did receive a response from Northern Township rejecting that. So that's also happened. Obviously, when we got that letter, speaking for myself, I was quite disappointed to see that because, to just get blunt, they can lawyer up, the city can lawyer up, an administrative judge can make a determination of what's going to happen. That's the path that appears we're currently on. But I'll tell you, if Northern Township and the City of Bemidji allow a judge to determine what's going to happen to our community, we've all failed.
True.
Every last one of us. There are no winners in those kinds of situations. And if we can't come together and decide mutually what makes the best sense for our region, our community, and all of our citizens, it's going to be a loss because I truly believe there will be unintended consequences that come from that. There will be potentially hurt feelings and positions that get entrenched over time, and it's hard to come back from that. And, as a council member, there are some decisions we make that can be easily remedied in the future. Right now we're dealing with some trees downtown, making some changes. If a new council came in 2 or 4 years and decided they didn't like that, pretty easy to change. It'll cost money, but easy to change. Whatever the township and city does in all of this will have an impact on our community for generations.
Sure.
That's serious. And I don't believe anyone can tell you with 100% accuracy what the outcome will be. And when I think about, situations like Brainerd Baxter, is that what we want here?
Right.
Is that what's in our best interest? Do we want to duplicate everything? 2 sets of everything? And then we can fight with one another over the resources at the state and the federal government so we can duplicate everything? Is that the road we're on? I'm disappointed. But we'll see what happens. Always hold hope. Always keep knocking on the door. Always see if there's some solution that can be had here. But I sure hope we figure it out.
Well, I do believe more talking helps sitting down and figuring things out, like you said.
Well, and what I can tell you, using a bit of an analogy from my business career. I've been in situations like this in my business world.
Sure.
I've had people violating patents that we have and all kinds of interesting things. And I have found that I've accomplished a whole lot more in life when we kick the attorneys out of the room, sit down together and figure it out. And this isn't a shot against legal or a shot against attorneys.
It's just true.
But, once you're in that position, everything you say is measured. How you come across is measured. Everything's about positioning. That's just the legal world. And if anybody's ever been in any kind of lawsuit, you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
And I think the future of our community deserves better than that.
Let's rewind.
Yes, sir.
I've been here for 21 years. This has been going on the entire time I've lived here. Are we going to annex around the lake or are we not? I'm sure it goes back even further than that. Start us at the beginning.
Well, I can only start you, I guess, at my beginning, so to speak. So about 3 months after I became mayor in 2021, in March of 2021, Rutgers, Birchmont Lodge, reached out and said, we've got a sewer issue.
Right.
We need help, and we need to solve this soon. And they reached out to the city and said, can we connect to city services? We know that doing so will probably require annexation, but we don't know, what else to do. We need some help. So as a good neighbor, we started having conversations about how that might happen. And there were a number of options put on the table about how that might happen. One of those options early on was what we call a flag lot annexation, where we would only annex Rutgers, nothing else. We would run pipe down the county road, solve the problem. We at the time had about $1.6 million in COVID dollars, ARP dollars, that we could have potentially used for that. And Northern Township rejected that. And I was in a meeting with some of their leadership, me personally, so I can speak to this. And I was told we're not agreeable to that because if you annex Rutgers, once the city has Rutgers, it can theoretically annex other properties off of that, and we're not comfortable. Well, from my standpoint as a city, that was about the best offer we could put on the table because, the reason a city exists is to provide service. It's to create density. I mean, that's what a city does. So for someone to say, you should provide city services solely under a contract, if you're going to do that, then what's the point of ever becoming a city? And back then, there was never any conversation about Northern Township becoming its own city. That was never part of the conversation, So that's where it started, was that request. And from there were conversations about, well, if we're going to sue or Rutgers, whoever, then we know that the state park and the DNR are looking hard at that as well. And we know that the safest play to preserve Lake Bemidji ultimately is to sewer it, because that's how you guarantee that you're not going to have any septic issues. And, we had just spent all these dollars to upgrade our water treatment plant as well at the airport. So it would have been the easiest thing in the world for us to bring city water along with city sewer, which then eliminates all the wells that you would have there, which again reduces contamination of the aquifer and anything leaching into the lake. So really, city sewer, city water, all the way around the lake, that's probably your single best way of making sure that lake stays pristine. So the conversation morphed from, hey, how do we help Rutgers, to how do we start sewering the whole lake and so forth. And then there were conversations that took place between the city and the township. We presented, I believe, a list of 6 options of different ways we could do this. One of the options included doing a contract. And there was a lot of conversation at the time, should you offer that? And speaking for myself, my point of view was, why take any option off the table until you've studied it and vetted it?
Sure.
But to say at that point, oh, we for sure can do any of these 6 things, you don't know. You're just, generating ideas, and you have to walk them out. You have to talk to your engineering and say, what would it mean if we did it this way or that way? You have to talk to your legal and say, well, what would it mean if we did it this way or that way? And we started vetting all of those things. And so I think ultimately Northern Township took the point of view that they really wanted it under contract, and that was the only way they would consider it. After we vetted it as a city, we didn't believe that was appropriate or in the best interest of the citizens of the city. And so we hit an impasse. And that's kind of where we sat for a while.
If you had to guess, if Lake Bemidji wasn't a major part of this conversation, would we be having this conversation? I mean, if that was just a farm field where you're not worried about septic, you're not worried about water tables, you're not worried about any of that other stuff, would we be having this conversation?
That's kind of complicated because part of the reason we're having the conversation is because Northern Township received federal funding to do another septic plant. Part of the reason they received that funding is the preservation of the lake. If you don't have the lake, you don't get the grant. If you don't have the grant, you probably don't have the dollars to even be talking about this.
Sure.
So, it's a little hard to separate the egg white, if you will,
Sure.
out of that.
Well, people are talking, and more to come.
Yeah, there is, and I'm sure there'll be this meeting today at 6:30. There'll be some things that come out of that. The city will continue its conversations. It'll be interesting to see where it all goes. But, per the resolution, that was passed unanimously by the council, and I think the goal of that was let's withdraw our legalities here and sit down and see if we can figure this out. And for me, I think if you're going to have a real conversation and a real negotiation, people have to come into a room without any pre-drawn lines.
Good luck with that.
And then you have to think about what's in the best interest of the community. And, but I guess I don't want to be cynical about it because, again, this is going to outlive me being, mayor by generations.
Sure.
It's going to outlive the Northern Town Board by generations. And we'll all be judged by what we do and how we do it. And as we should. We have an obligation here to the entire community. So that's the whole thing. Like, that's what keeps weighing on me is, I'm going to be, hopefully, assuming I'm alive, 70, 80 years old at some point, living in this community. What's it going to be like? And the decisions that are made around this are probably going to have a pretty significant impact on what Bemidji looks like at that point in time.
How about the trees downtown?
I thought that's what Schulte was going to start with, but he brought out the big whack-a-mole mallet.
Nope.
Yeah, no, so we are replacing some trees downtown, and we've been trying to get the word out there for a few months because we kind of have a root problem. So the trees that were planted there years ago probably weren't the best species for the application, and so we started having issues with the roots coming up through the sidewalk. I think if you walk some of these streets, you'll see where there's upheaval. And there's also been issues with roots impacting piping.
Sure.
That's under the streets. And so I had some citizens call and say, hey, we drove by these trees and you cut them down and we don't see any issue with the sidewalk, and why are you doing that? Well, because what you can't see is what's underneath the street, and that's those roots becoming issues with those pipes. So yeah, we're going to get that all swapped out. There will be trees put back into many of those locations. There'll be a different species, one that's a little bit more conducive to the application. But yeah, if you're rolling around downtown, we cut down a bunch of trees, and it most assuredly created some conversation, despite all our efforts to let people know there were things going on.
Well, it makes so the intention was to have trees, right? And everybody wanted beauty. So we just stuck some trees in there.
See,
and trees grow big.
Right.
Yeah, and I get asked these questions. So why'd you guys pick? I don't know.
Right.
Sorry, I wasn't. I wasn't here. I can't tell you.
It's just when we are very excited or have a lot of energy to have an issue of making sure we have trees, that group of people needs to also be involved in making sure it's the right tree.
That is correct. And, nobody bats 100 either. So,
right.
Again, it's kind of like the mysterious sinkhole we had.
Yeah, did you ever think you'd be dealing with sinkholes as a mayor?
No, and then the underground tunnels and all the theories about why the tunnels exist and stories about prohibition
right.
and just all of this stuff, and I was amazed because we just responded to a sinkhole.
Right.
And you go to the sinkhole and you realize there's an entire basement. We have a parking lot over it. I mean, fortunately, nothing really bad happened and we figured it out. But when I was over there watching the work get done, I was like, we pretty much had an underground parking garage here
right.
the whole time, I guess. I don't, and I don't still know the whole story. There's a few theories about what happened there, but suddenly that wasn't necessarily in the budget either to drag all that fill in and level that off and fix it. But again, glad nobody got, had an issue there where anybody got injured or there was a problem. But you're correct. Nobody wakes up on a Tuesday and says, hey, we're going to have the mystery of the sinkhole today, right? So anyways, I guess in some ways that's easier to deal with some of the other stuff we're dealing with. But yeah.
It is. I do appreciate those days, right? When there wasn't all the regulations and probably a lot less, because apparently somebody said, just
pave over it.
Pave over it. We got enough there.
Well, right, and you're back to that. You were asking, how did these trees get planted? I'm asking, how did we decide to put a parking lot over a basement? I don't know. I mean, I can only assume there were smart, intelligent people in the city in years past. There was probably some rationale for why that was done. It escapes me today, but right? They're probably, I don't even know if it was cost. What was it? I don't know, but somebody made the call, right? To your point, somebody made the call.
Was there? I guess I didn't see, but was there like a floor, so to speak, that they could put the gravel and then cement and sidewalks in that area?
Kind of got the feel. I did not see it all before it was kind of tore up, but that's kind of my understanding, is that in essence there was kind of a floor there. And I'm sure part of it, got excavated out a little bit there, and it was, by the time I got there to look at it, I mean, I was looking at a full basement with concrete blocks and the whole 9 yards, going, what is this? So anyways.
All right, a true softball question here. BSU graduation this weekend. College brings a lot of good. College is going to bring a little bad. It's kind of the nature of the beast. Fishing opener this weekend brings a lot of good to the town.
Yeah.
West Fraser has announced their plans for $130-some million renovation of their facility.
Huge
A
modernization.
lot of good things going on in this town, aren't there?
There totally are. That expansion over at West Fraser is bringing in state-of-the-art equipment, which then guarantees the future of that plant long term. You don't make that kind of investment and then shut it down. In the history of our community, we've seen plants shut down. So, that's a pretty big deal. North Central Door has done an expansion as well. We're busy working on the railroad corridor, and everything seems to be lining up to get that YMCA project done as well. So, you kind of go down the list of things that are going on. There are some really positive things that are, starting to change and shape the community. Even on the Sanford Center side, we just renewed our naming rights contract with Sanford Health for another 3 years. That's $200,000 a year. That's a big deal.
Sure.
To know that for the next 3 years that's settled. So, do we have some challenges we need to work through? Absolutely. That's how it goes with a city or with any community as you grow it out. But we're making some headway. And we're also, to kind of touch in a tangent of what we were talking about earlier, the clarifier project at the wastewater treatment plant. That was another $12 million investment into that plant. It's going to come online this year. Like, we're getting really close to having that wrapped up. That was another $4.4 million in federal funding that got invested. Over the last year, we opened both stages of the water treatment plant at the airport, securing clean water for the city of Bemidji for generations to come. So all these pieces are coming together to fuel growth. That's what that does, right? If you have more sewer capacity, you can grow. You have more water capacity, you can grow. You have more infrastructure and amenities like the YMCA, you give people more reason to be here. So those are all positive things.
Until next month.
We didn't even talk roundabouts.
Right?
How about that?
Yeah, well, I know when I come here, who like tees me up, puts me right there on the tee and says, let me get the 3-wood. But yeah, no, I mean, that project's going to happen too. We're obviously doing some work as a city this summer on Middle School Drive. It will be the majority of it. But the raised grant dollars seem to have been released. So that project is back on track, although a little bit
year
delayed. But, again, when you get a road project fully funded by state and federal dollars, that doesn't happen really very often. So that's another positive thing that is going on as well. So, yeah, no, I think we're headed in the right direction, but we have some big things we need to sort out. I was just going to check my little list here, but the only other thing I was going to say is that we're also in the middle of our housing study and comp plan, how we're going to look at using land in the city for the next 10 years. So that's a huge part of planning, and same with that housing study, to really understand the detailed nuts and bolts of where you are there so you can start enacting policies and procedures to make it better.
Thanks for taking biting the bullet a little.
Well, I signed up for this, so that's always my attitude, right? You're going to have to deal with difficult things. You're going to have hard conversations. Eventually, you're going to make difficult decisions, and not everybody's going to appreciate it, and that's just how it goes. But you have to be out there, be willing to talk to people, be willing to hear criticism, hopefully keep getting better at it. That's all you can do, I can't...
Be informed. Go to a meeting tonight at 6:30.
There you go. And hey, happy Mother's Days to all the moms out there, because that's coming. We talked about graduation and all these other things, but kind of all starts with mom, doesn't it?
Sure does.
So happy Mother's Day.
Good luck fishing.
That too.